We're interested in any comments you have, Mr. Simon, on your experiences during the war and perhaps starting with your family prior to the war. Where you were, who they were.
I was born in a suburb of a city called Karlovy Vary or Carlsbad, a resort town in the Sudetenland, which is now the Czech Republic and used to be Czechoslovakia since 1918. My parents were business people. We had a wholesale business of all sorts of things, also retail, but wholesale was the primary function. And I was born in 1923 and brought up as a 10-year younger brother of my sister, and consequently spoiled considerably. Czechoslovakia was an extremely progressive country with several nationalities living there together in peace. It looked like the Czechs, the Slovaks, the Germans, the Hungarians, the Poles, and the Russians could live together in peace in one country until about low 30s, 1930s, when Hitler came to power in Germany. And after he started rearming the country, which Germany was prohibited from doing by the peace treaty of Versailles, he started to advertise to combine all Germans into one country, beginning with Austria, the Sudetenland. And I believe there were some Germans in Western Poland and some Germans in Eastern France. He wanted to bring all the Germans back under his regime.
You said advertise. Does that mean that you saw actual advertisements when you were a child?
That's all I heard on the radio since, 1933. I was 10 years old at the time, and as much as I could understand about international politics, the thing I remember was Germans belonging to Germany and Jews don't, and we want to get rid of them.
So you remember actual radio propaganda then?
Oh, that's all we heard. When Hitler gave a speech, which usually was a major occasion, everybody listened to the radio. You know, we didn't have television, of course, in those days, but we saw it in the newsreels and the movies, and we could just picture it just by hearing it on the radio. We were in fear from 1933 on. We didn't know what was going to happen until the Munich meeting, when it was decided that the Sudetenland would be adopted by Germany and the borders redrawn. As a matter of fact, it happened, the official date was October 1st, 1938, for the adoption.
And where were you living on that date?
I was living at home with my parents. Our business was functioning. I was going to school.
And this was in Carlsbad?
Yeah.
That's very near the German border.
Yeah, it's about 20 miles. We used to go skiing every weekend right on the German border. I think it was around the 15th of September I came out of school to go home for lunch when a swastika was hanging on the building across the street from the a swastika flag was hanging from the building across the street from the school. A sign that that's the way it's going to be. So I went home, and my mother had one of my favorite dishes boiling on the stove, and we just let it boil and took a briefcase. We were afraid to take a suitcase. Walk to the railroad depot and take the next train to Pilsen. Moved in with my sister. My sister, who was 10 years older, was married and moved to Pilsen.
When did she move to Pilsen?
Well, she married in 1933. That's when she moved. So Pilsen was inland, and it was not part of the Sudetenland. Then it cleared up that the Germans won't actually come in until between the 1st and the 10th of October. So my father wasn't too well. He had a bad case of rheumatism. So my mother and I rented a truck, and we went back once more and took a few essential things to Pilsen. But most of it stayed there. And as you know, all Jewish property was confiscated.
So your father lost his business.
We lost everything. We lost furniture, we lost business. We had a few essentials that we threw on and took with us. My sister had a very nice apartment in Pilsen. And we lived with them for about a year, until one morning I got up and looked out the window, and about half a block from the building we lived in, there's a bridge across one of the rivers in Pilsen, and I looked second time, and I noticed German soldiers guarding the bridge. So I screamed a little bit, and my folks came to the window and looked out too, and said, well, this is it. And that's how they created the Czech protectorate with a puppet government. Anyway, it was pretty clear where this was going. So my parents signed me up for what was called the Youth Aliyah, Aliyat Noar in Hebrew, which took about a year before it developed into something concrete. In the meantime, they sent me to all kinds of camps, Jewish camps, to prepare for a different kind of life.
How did your parents sign you up for the Youth Aliyah?
I had to pay for it.
And what preparation did you receive?
Well, you sent your children sometimes to a farm for 4 weeks. Let them work there. You know, find out that life is not all school and fun. So I couldn't go to school anymore. So first I found a job packaging some powder. And then my brother-in-law had a friend who owned a candy company, and he got me a job there. And I learned how to make candy. Well, 1940 was the year that we got notified that there's a place for me in one of the transports. And I don't quite know how it was organized, but it was an organized illegal transport from Prague to Tel Aviv. It went on a train to Vienna, from Vienna to Trieste in northern Italy, It's right on the Yugoslav border, Trieste's. And there we embarked on a ship, and we stopped in. We made 2 stops. One was in Piraeus, which is the port for Athens. Second stop, Cyprus, and from there we wound up in Palestine, in Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv didn't have a harbor. I don't know if they have today, but they didn't have a harbor, so we just anchored down near the coast, and they picked us up in boats.
Do you remember how many kids were in your group?
Around 20. We had a good trip. We had fun on the ship. I used to play the accordion, and we had all kinds of programs there.
Were they all Czechoslovakian?
No, we had, well, most of them were from Czechoslovakia. We had some Viennese and some Germans. Once we got on land, we were sent to a place called Ben Shemen, which was at the time the one and only agriculture school in Palestine. And living there was based on a kibbutz life. The odd part about it was that there were some people with money who could have gotten out one way or the other. They didn't believe that the future was going to be as bad as it turned out to be. My uncle happened to be one of them. He was financially better off than my parents were. He had contacts all over the world. He was in the China business, making china, dishes, the very decorated stuff. And he had customers all over the world, from India to the United States, South America, South Africa. He told me if I would be interested in taking over his business, that after I get done with school, he would send me to some of these countries to learn the trade. So he had the contacts, he had the money, he even had the money abroad. It wasn't all in Czechoslovakia, and decided not to leave. So they all stayed there, and with the exception of my sister, who got out miraculously, and I really don't know how she managed it in 1941. There wasn't anybody leaving anymore. 1940 was the last year that they let the illegal transports out. They all stayed there. Everybody went eventually to Theresienstadt, and were sent out to the various camps in most cases.
Did not return?
Not very many. You can count them on your hand, your fingers. When I came back, now I'm jumping here a little bit, when I came back in 1945 as a soldier, that was the first trip I made to Terezin. And walking up the main street, I ran into 2 people who were very, very close friends of mine in Pilsen. Well, we embraced, very happy to see each other, and they told me of, if I mentioned their name, they told me exactly when they went, where they went, and what happened to them. And in most cases, well, don't look. My parents, don't waste your energies. The rest of my family, same thing.
Your uncle included?
Mm-hmm. Yes. I had several uncles, aunts. None of them survived.
Why don't you tell us then what developed during the war, your wartime experiences?
Well, I graduated after 2 years, and right about that time I got this postcard from my mother from Warsaw. And at the same time, Rommel was advancing towards El Alamein. And I was looking for a job in Tel Aviv and couldn't find anything that would pay for food. They started to cut diamonds in Tel Aviv at the time, and I tried to learn the trade, but they were only paying about half of the minimum that you need to live on. So with that postcard and the news about the Germans coming close to Egypt, I went back to Tel Aviv and enlisted. And I went in the Jewish Brigade of the English Army. So you go through basic training. We had several people from Czechoslovakia in that group, and we got together once, and most of them thought they wanted to go back for one reason or another, and I wanted to go back because of the family, primarily. So we decided to apply for a transfer into the Czech Army in exile, who had 4,000 men in the Middle East and 4,000 men in England and about 8,000 men in Russia. Well, it took 9 months to get processed, and after 9 months they approved the transfer, and all of us went into the Czech Army. The headquarters of the Czech Army was in Haifa, although the army itself was in Libya. They were fighting around Tobruk and Benghazi. I didn't quite get to that point because they decided they were going to ship the 4,000-man Czech army to England, combine us with the 4,000 men in England.
Where was your duty?
We wound up in Dunkirk.
You were there after the D-Day invasion?
After the D-Day invasion, yeah. We went over about the 15th of June. Now, the invasion started the 6th of June. We went over about the 15th of June, across the channel, and had to jump from the ship into the landing crafts, and could break your leg real easy, but somehow we managed to survive.
Were you infantry?
No, I was in the artillery. I was pulling a cannon. When the end of the war came, I think it was in May 8th, I believe it was 1945. We were extremely happy, and we stayed there only long enough to pack up, and then the whole 8,000 men went through Germany back to Czechoslovakia. Our first stop was in Luxembourg, and we were greeted as liberators every place we went, other than by the Germans. In Luxembourg, they were extremely friendly. Invited us to go to the homes and eat. We didn't know how long we were going to stay there. So. And then we saw all the destruction of Germany, and we jumped for joy because there was hardly a building left intact. Well, I stayed in Czechoslovakia for almost 3 years. And when I saw that the communists will take over the country, which was January, February of 1948, I decided to leave, and I looked for ways to get out. And so I met an English war bride who had some contacts in Prague with the basement of the American and the English consulates. They ran the underground movement from there. And she got me in contact with them, gave me the phone number, and I called up, and they said, well, go back home. When the time comes, we'll call you. And they called me the end of May 1948. I had to take essentials that I could carry on my bag and put them in a suitcase and go to Prague, which was east, from where I lived. From there, we took a train to Pilsen, from Pilsen to Klatovy, from Klatovy another train to 2 stations before the border. We left the train, went into the woods, repacked the suitcase into a rucksack, put it on the back, and start walking. And we walked about 8 hours. Got to a farm. The owner of the farm was part of the underground, and he put us up in a barn till midnight, gave us something to eat, and then the guide came. The guide turned out to be a German smuggler who smuggled goods into Czechoslovakia and people out of Czechoslovakia, and he had his contacts with the German border police. So he took us straight to the police station in Bavaria. The first thing they did is check what we carried for weapons, and they confiscated 2 of mine. One was a carton of Lucky Strikes and one was a salami. And then they called the American military police. They picked us up and took us to a transit camp to be deloused. I wasn't any dirtier than I am right now, but that's what they did. And I was with a student, a Czech student from Prague. And they asked me if I want to go to a Jewish camp or a Czech camp. I didn't know the difference. I asked him what is the difference between the two, and he said, well, you get food from America and you get clothing from America, and the Czechs are kind of poor right now because they just started this. I went to a Czech camp anyway.
Where was that?
The first camp was in Regensburg, in a school building. A week later, I met my wife, and it took a while, but we eventually got married. In the meantime, they transferred us from Regensburg to Murnau, which is 10 miles from Garmisch-Partenkirchen. Beautiful country, absolutely gorgeous country. It's like Aspen, Vale, here. And we spent about a year in the camp.
Can you describe the camp a little bit, the living conditions, food, clothing, what you did?
While the conditions were poor, it was a military building. You know, the married people got a room. The single people moved in, 20, 30 people in one room. And food was the poorest. We had potatoes. We had what they call soup. It was the bare minimum of calories to survive. It was figured out that way. I was very fortunate. Somebody told me there's a joint office in Munich, and if you go there, not only can you get some food, but you may also get a job. So I went on the next train, went to Munich, applied in the transportation department of the joint.
What's a joint?
The joint is they oversaw the distribution of the food and the clothing in all the Jewish camps in Germany. And of course they had big bureaucracy, and they had cars and they had trucks and they needed drivers for this, and I figured that would be something I could do. And I found out the transportation officer, the head man, was an ex-soldier, Czech soldier that I served with in England. So I went in and I got the job, and so Monday morning I would go to Munich, and Friday evening I would go back to Murnau for about a year. My job was eventually, that was not in the beginning, to start with I had to drive a big truck. Eventually I wound up being a movie projectionist. They had movie camera, sound equipment on an army ambulance, and I drove around all the Jewish camps showing movies, American movies, Yiddish movies. And I got to know a lot of people and most of the camps. The Jewish camps were better off than the Czech camps. They got shipments from the joint of food and clothing. And the joint also had a big immigration department. This friend of mine in the transportation, his wife was the assistant of the immigration department. So we signed up with them to emigrate to, well, as long as I was single, I wanted to go to England to be with my sister. But once we decided to get married, we changed it to go either to the United States or to Australia. And also decided that whoever comes through first, that's where we're going to wind up, and wind up in the States.